Vanakkam. It's an honor to rise today to speak in support of Tamil Genocide Education Week, because this week will provide a space for Tamils, for Ontarians, for people across the board to learn about a grave, grave injustice against the Tamil people, a history of genocide and violence that has been carried out against the Tamil people by the Sri Lankan government. The Sri Lankan government has a long history of persecuting the Tamil people. For decades, the Sri Lankan government has carried out a campaign of structural, direct, and cultural violence and genocide against the Tamil people. We remember the organized genocide of Black July in 1983, where the Sri Lankan government provided voters lists, census data, so that organized state mobs could identify Tamil households, so organized state mobs could attack Tamils and kill Tamils in the thousands. We remember the burning of the Jaffna Library, where priceless artifacts and documents were robbed from the Tamil people. We remember the bombing of the orphanage in Sanchole, the mass graves of Semini. We remember the years in which Tamils were picked up in white vans to be tortured and disappeared, where their families till today are asking, where are their loved ones who are picked up and killed by the Sri Lankan government? The Sri Lankan government has carried out a campaign of violence against the Tamil people, where Tamils have been disenfranchised socially, culturally, and economically, have been denied basic freedoms in an attempt to eliminate the Tamil people, their culture, and their way of life. One of the most devastating attacks against the Tamil people was the 2009 Mullawaikal genocide, or the Mullawaikal massacre, where the Sri Lankan government carried out an attack that resulted in tens of thousands of Tamils being murdered and killed. Numbers as high as 150,000 Tamils were killed in a genocide carried out by the Sri Lankan government. I remember 2009. I remember seeing Tamils organize protests across the board. I remember seeing Tamils in the thousands take to the streets here in Toronto. I remember seeing their protest sites in front of this very building of Queen's Park. I remember seeing their campsites for day and night, through cold weather, through rain. They would be camped out on University. I remember a human chain of Tamils wrapping themselves around the core of downtown Toronto to bring awareness to this genocide being conducted against the Tamil people. And I'm sad to say that when the Tamil people were facing this injustice, world leaders did not answer. That at a time where Tamil people were facing so much death and destruction, they were not given the support, they were not given the awareness, they were not given the intervention that was needed. And this is the campaign of violence that continues today. We need only look at recent times to see the destruction of the Mullawaikal monument at Jaffna University by the Sri Lankan government, where another attempt was made by the Sri Lankan government to eliminate the history of the Tamil people and this history of violence being carried out against them by the Sri Lankan government. But what we also saw at that time was resilience. We saw the resilience of Tamil people across the world, here in Brampton, in Ontario, in Toronto, rise up and hold rallies to create awareness about the destruction, the erasure of Tamil history, of something that happened only in 2009. And from that, we saw change. We saw Tamil people have an impact with the organizing. And what we see now, with the passage of Tamil Genocide Education Week, we are seeing the results of this organized, of a decade, of more than a decade, of decades of Tamil people coming together to bring awareness to the injustices against the Tamil community, of rallies and organizing and youth meetings, a movement that is largely youth-led, that has resulted in this awareness being spread across the world. And now, with the passage of Tamil Genocide Education Week, we're going to see an opportunity for Tamil community to not just educate their next generations and their current generations about the Tamil genocide, but for non-Tamils, for Ontarians, to learn about their Tamil neighbours, to learn about the genocide, the intergenerational trauma that continues to devastate the Tamil community. It is an honour to rise today to stand in support of this very, very important bill, of a week for us to ensure that as Ontarians, we commit ourselves to building a province where Tamil people can remember those lost in the genocide without intimidation, and further, where we continue to organize to ensure that those who conducted this genocide are held to account. Because we must understand that to move forward is to make sure there's justice and accountability. So let's continue to support our Tamil brothers and sisters. Let's continue to fight for justice, and let's do that by immediately passing Tamil Genocide Education Week. Thank you so much. Vanakkam.